Today's discussion will be, the title I have here is Hashem's Diet, or Healthy Living, Mind, Body, and Soul. We'll cover topics of eating, Inyanei Achila, and including the dietary laws as well as other concepts that relate to eating. Today we're going to talk about what we do so often, 3 times a day if you're lucky. Others, myself included lately, maybe even more than 3 times a day. Everybody eats and drinks, nice meals. So we're going to talk about eating. Today in America and in a lot of parts of the world, everyone's obsessed with, the idea of eating healthy, dieting. So many different diet books that are out there. Everybody's a doctor trying to, make money on how to help people lose weight. So the truth is, obviously, when it comes to eating, there's a book that precedes all of these books, and we're talking about the Torah. The Torah defines for us laws of eating and ways to eat and all different concepts that relate to eating. The Rambam also gives us, in comparing to the health books of today, also health advice on how to eat healthy and be healthy. Now, when we talk about being healthy, living healthy, so obviously from a Jewish perspective, we're not just talking about physical health. The idea of trying to look good only physically and be in physical good shape is obviously something that we should pay attention to. A person should be healthy, but ultimately we need health. We're talking about mind, body, and soul. We want a healthy mind, body, and soul. Now, of that, obviously, ultimately, since the soul lives forever, one could argue that, it's even more important that we have a healthy soul than the rest. Not, of course, allowing us to take, to mistreat our bodies. But, ultimately, we have a healthy body, but even have a healthy soul is even more important. Now, let's talk about the concept of eating. Before we even start talking about the details, we have to ask ourselves a question. This is brought by the Hasidic masters, the Admor HaZaken, the Alter Rabbi they call him in English. He brings out a question, one of his discourses. He says basically, man was created by God, along with everything else that exists in the world, right? Through the 10 utterances, God made everything. All physicality, including man, exists from divine speech, from God speaking and creating the world. Now, other things that exist, inanimate objects, do not need to eat to survive, nor do plant life. We only see animal life and human life that require to eat. And the question essentially is, why isn't the speech of God that brought us into existence enough to maintain our existence? Why do we need to, in addition to the vitality that comes straight from the divine speech, why do we also need to eat other things that God created, which are being created also by God's divine speech? Why let it come direct to us? Essentially, God did not have to make man dependent on eating. He could have made us sustained other ways. So we have to understand that God made us specifically requiring to eat, and we want to appreciate and understand in depth why God made it so. I mean, I guess if you have, enjoy a good cheesecake, you have an answer already. Good food is tasty, and we have pleasure from that, and so God didn't want to deny us of this pleasure. Well, okay, one could answer that, but obviously we did not come into this world to overindulge in the pleasures. That is an added blessing that God gave us the ability to taste food, and it's pleasurable. It could have been like gasoline. The way a car, you put gas in the car and it runs. So we could have taken fuel like nutrients without the benefits of eating. But nonetheless, God didn't have to make any of it. As a matter of fact, the Chidah brings in his commentaries the same idea. He asks in his writings that essentially God did not have to make man with the requirement to eat. He actually mentions a creature, from the wildlife that did not need to eat. In his time and place, he must have found, an animal that did not eat, a bird, some type of bird. And he says, if God made a bird, this particular bird, without a requirement to eat food, so then why didn't he make man that way? And he goes further to say, and if God didn't want to make all mankind that way, at least the Am Yisrael, the Jewish people that have so many mitzvahs to do. We have 613 mitzvahs, and we have the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is constantly upon us to learn, and become, scholars. We have to be very smart to run a household. Even every house needs an unofficial rabbi. You need to learn a lot to know what's appropriate in a home. So the Jewish people that are so busy doing God's mitzvahs and learning God's Torah, at least let them be sustained, without having to eat. That would free up so much time. How much time do we waste on going out to make a living in order to have food? So if we didn't have to eat, we could have all that time saved and used for mitzvahs and learning. So the Chida asks this question, discussing Birkat HaMazon, the blessings of that we eat over food. And we're going to get to how he answers it, later on in our discussion. Now, it's important to understand that once God made us requiring to eat, that food that we eat becomes a part of us. The food affects our body. We see that. It's very clear. The different foods you eat, you can be more tired, less tired, more energetic, stronger. The wrong foods can make you weaker, more tired, put you to sleep. But food also affects our soul. And that is something that we don't usually think about, that what we eat can affect our soul. Now, based on this, it comes out interesting. There's a famous, saying that you are what you eat. It's very true. A person is what he eats. The food he eats becomes the blood that pumps through his veins. And it affects a person. We see here that the rabbis warn us, if we eat animals that are too wild, that will affect the nature of a person. That's you are what you eat. But even spiritually, in a deeper sense, things that we're not even conscious of are affected by what we eat. And that we have to explore and appreciate. With this, I'd like to get into starting to talk about the most basic and well-known concept that regulates Jewish eating is the dietary laws, the laws of kashrut. So let us start with this aspect of eating. First of all, over the different classes, I've been blessed to give, I find a lot of times, especially with the beginner students that are coming from a more secular background, they're troubled with the concept of kosher. They accept some concepts of Torah, they accept certain moral concepts, and they can respect and appreciate that God cares how a person treats, for example, his fellow. They have no problem accepting that these type of rules come from God. God created all of us, loving God, He wants us to be nice to each other. But I hear all the time, why does we have to keep kosher? Who cares? Why would God care if we eat kosher? Many people ask, why can't I have my cheeseburger? Just have a cheeseburger, I'm ruining the world. I'm not hurting nobody. It makes no sense. It's irrational to say that a person shouldn't be able to have a cheeseburger. Cheeseburger, really, it's interesting. It's more difficult to accept than other kashrut laws because here the cheese is kosher and the meat is kosher. It's only the combination that's not kosher. At least with pig, we say consistently it's not kosher. Again, but all laws of kosher, all kosher laws are what we call irrational commands. They don't make any sense logically, and that's why they're of the mitzvah. That's a category of a chok. A chok is a statute. Regarding a statute, God says, this is a statute for me. You have no right to think about it and to question it. Your job as my creation, as a person in this world, is to accept what I decree and do it. That's ultimately the highest level of faith and obedience that we're meant to have. And we do the chukim because God said so. That's why we do everything. Why? Because God said so. Why do I treat my fellow nice? Because God said so. Why do I take care of myself even? A person would think he has the right to mistreat himself. Because God said so. Why do I not eat a cheeseburger? Because God said not to. That's ultimately the root of every mitzvah. However, we have different category mitzvahs. The chukim, which make no sense, we can only do them because God said so. We cannot do them because they make sense to us, because they don't. Other mitzvahs, like the mishpatim, which are the ordinances and the monetary laws, all of the different laws that are sensible, mishpat, that we have in court, all the type of court laws. You can't damage someone's property, you can't steal, you have to pay back. Included in this category of mishpatim are all sensible type of laws. Some laws we're taught we would have even figured out without the Torah. Yet the Torah still goes out of its way to command them as well. One can ask, why did the Torah have to command mitzvahs that are rational that I know anyway? So here it's interesting. It's not enough to do the rational mitzvahs because they make sense to you. You have to also do those because God said so. And in truth, the fact that those mitzvahs make sense is only not necessarily defining the entire mitzvah. It's the part that we can understand, but there's depth to a mitzvah that may be beyond what we can understand. So there's an aspect of a chok, of a statute, even in the simple mitzvah of a mishpat, which we have full understanding of, so to speak, we would think, that it's also beyond our understanding. So ultimately, even the mishpatim have to be done because God said so. That's why all mitzvahs are done because God said so. There's a middle type of mitzvah. While we're talking about mitzvahs, just so we can have a clear understanding of the three different types of mitzvahs, we mentioned that the chukim are beyond intellect. They're not logical. We mentioned mishpatim, the judiciary laws, the laws between us and our fellow that make sense. Don't rob, don't cheat, don't steal. Those laws are sensible, but also they come from God, which means there's a deeper aspect to them that can go beyond our grasp of the mitzvah. So therefore we do it also because God said, as we just... and also the third type of mitzvah is a middle ground. That middle ground is this. It's a mitzvah that we would never figure out on our own. Our minds would not conclude that we should do such a mitzvah, like putting on tefillin or keeping Shabbos. One would never deduce, because God made the world in 6 days, that we should rest on the seventh day. However, once God says that I made the world in 6 days, therefore you should rest on the seventh, we can appreciate and understand that it's appropriate to rest on the seventh. And that mitzvah is what we call a mitzvah that is beyond the initial grasp of our intellect. But once we have the mitzvah, then we can grasp the mitzvah and its reasons and its benefits through our intellect. So we have those three categories of mitzvahs. Now, because the kosher laws, because the laws of eating, not eating milk and meat, not eating pig, not eating shelled fish, because those laws are irrational to us, they don't make any sense. There's an interesting rule we conclude. First of all, a non-Jew cannot be trusted with ideas of kashrut, never. And we have to appreciate why he can't be trusted. Why can't we trust him? Take a nice person, he's my friend, we worked together for years, and why would he lie to me? Why would he betray me? So why shouldn't I trust him with matters of kashrut? This we see come up a lot because kosher restaurants in America and many other places, we don't see it as much in Israel, but in America, and kosher restaurants hire many non-Jewish workers, non-Jewish chefs. Now, we could sit them down and say, listen, this is a kosher restaurant. I know the way you eat, which I respect. You don't have to keep these laws. But we, as Jews, to us, these laws are very serious. They come from God. And mixing even non-biblical ideas like mixing fish and meat together in the same pot without cleaning it, we can't do. Mixing milk and fish for Sephardim, we can't do. So let's imagine we tell all of our workers, we brief them, we tell them all of the rules of kashrut, and they're nice, decent people, we should trust them. We can't trust them because to them, this is like one big joke. It's like a comedy or a game. If we're playing Monopoly, everyone knows that this Monopoly money is not real money. So by telling a Gentile that I know that it looks like it doesn't make any sense, but to us it's very real, and if we would eat this cheeseburger or any of the things that are forbidden, it's going to damage us spiritually, it's an avera, we'll be punished, and the whole time he could be looking at you saying, yes, I understand. But if a situation presented itself that his job would be in jeopardy, or even if he thought that it might hurt his position in his job, he would not feel like compromising and saying, okay, I put the wrong fish in the wrong pot, because he doesn't want to do a bad job and be fired one day. So he's very quickly look around. If nobody saw that that he used the wrong pot, so then he wouldn't care in a lot of cases, because to him it's not real. If it's not real, we can't trust him. Now, why am I explaining all this? What do we care? We have rules. To us, they're real, and we follow them. Because the Jewish population has many different types of people with different ideas and different levels of acceptance and practice of Judaism. There is, so to speak, a non-Jew within us, each according to his own level. Jews that are raised secular, that are becoming religious, a big issue for them is to go beyond that, what they got used to, that the kosher laws are not really important, and to treat them with importance. So one of the battles of a person that's doing tshuva could be to accept these commands and treat them as holy and as important as they are, equally the will of God, as it is not to hurt a person. And that's a big challenge for him, because again, it's new to him, and it's also to him, he's suffering from the same symptoms that it's really not real, and God shouldn't care about these things that are not morally based. So we have to, when we're dealing with people, if we're more religious and we're dealing with people less religious, this comes up in family situations when you're visiting family. We have to understand and appreciate that it's not easy for everyone to respect and take on the laws the way we follow them, especially in kashrut. And so we have to know how to deal with those type of situations and be understanding that a person that has a hard time accepting it, appreciate that it's his challenge and we shouldn't be judgmental and look not to make conflict. And of course, a person cannot compromise the laws of kashrut for himself, but we shouldn't assume when we're talking to another Jew that how come you don't accept it? What is something wrong with you? No, people are challenged, especially if they're coming from outside, from far. Now, continuing with our discussion, we're going to address that we said already. We mentioned that the kashrut laws are chukim. They're what we call supra-rational laws, above logic. And in essence, we don't have the ability to understand these laws right now. But the reason for this is because really they follow a higher level of wisdom. When we see something that doesn't make sense, we can conclude because it's senseless or it's beyond our ability to make sense of it. If a genius mathematics person comes and starts to give you, formulas that are beyond, 10 levels beyond what you could understand, it won't make any sense to you. But in truth, he's a genius, and it makes too much sense for you. It's not like a clown who's doing jokes that really are senseless. So we have to appreciate these laws coming from God. God's wisdom is infinite. This is an expression of divine wisdom, which is beyond our human intellect. But it's not that it's void of intellect, it's just a much higher level of intellect. And this divine wisdom, this deeper dimension of divine wisdom, which is invested in the chukim, in the laws that we can't understand, that's only today. Today we can't understand them. But one day, when our minds will be expanded in the era of Mashiach, then we'll be able to understand even those mitzvot. It says that in the future, latid lavo, tameh mitzvot, the reasoning behind these mitzvot will be revealed. But now not. Now this that we're saying that right now the mitzvahs are not understandable. The truth is that through Kabbalah, we can understand some of it. And that, thank God, that he has revealed, especially in the later generations, Zohar and the writings of the Arizal, which really show us in a much deeper sense the spiritual reality, the truth above, which sheds light even on these mitzvahs, which there's obviously more to understand. When Mashiach comes, we'll understand it more fully. But even now, we can be explained, some of the ideas behind the laws of kashrut, which will even make them sensible, as long as we accept, obviously, this knowledge of truth that has been revealed through the Kabbalah. Now, what is this spiritual truth of the kosher laws that will help us make sense of them? So let us start, first of all, by explaining. We said before that you are what you eat. Now that's true, but what's also true is the reverse. You eat according to what you are. God made the laws of kashrut to fit who and what we are. Things that we're not allowed to eat, we're not allowed to eat them because they're not good for us. Just like any doctor that you go to will tell you to avoid things that are bad, so too God, the ultimate, doctor, told us, avoid these foods because they're spiritually bad for you. What did he allow us to eat? The things that are less spiritually bad or not spiritually bad. Now, this is all because of our neshama. A person is not just a physical person, he's a body and a soul united. Specifically, we have what's called a divine soul, a part of Hashem in us, a holy soul. That part of us, in order to protect its purity and sanctity, we have to be very careful what we eat. It's like someone who's, not a perfect example, but someone who's is diabetic or has high blood pressure. He has to be very careful. There are foods that he will not be allowed to eat, even though other people could eat them. So too, since our neshamas are specific neshamas that come from a realm of holiness, and so they're particular, certain things are damaging to them, whereas for a regular person that doesn't have this type of spiritual makeup, so then the same foods are not damaging. And to appreciate this fully, we're going to start by explaining the makeup, the spiritual makeup, the spiritual reality above, which then, of course, translates into the physical reality below. Because this world is a mirror image of the world above. Kegavna de la'ela, kegavna de latata is a quote from the Zohar that just as things are above, that's how they manifest below as well. And so let's start with this idea. The Zohar divides all of existence into two categories and then subdivides the second category into two categories. What are the two general categories? So the Zohar, remember, talks in a very cryptid, hidden way. So it says the right side and the left side. Now, the right side is the side of holiness, and the left side represents the side of unholiness. It's called the other side also. The Zohar calls it the other side. There's the side of Kedusha and the other side. Now, in the side of Kedusha, we explained, this is where our neshamot come from. This part, this spiritual realm is united with Hashem in the realm of Kedusha. There's 10 sfirot and not 11. That means there's no added element in that realm of Kedusha that separates from Hashem. It's all a world of oneness and unity. But the other side is separate. The other side is represented in the number 11 because it's separate. There's multiplicity in the other side, and it's the source for all of the negative forces where they come from. Now, in this idea of spiritual negative forces, we have two levels. We have a lower level which is completely negative. We call it the three completely unclean and evil klipot, husks, and they're extremely damaging to the neshama. There's another realm which we're going to call a middle realm. Really, it's outside of holiness, so it's part of this second realm in a general sense, but in a particular sense, it's its own realm. It's a neutral realm. It's a middle ground. It's not completely evil, and it's not holy. It's not kadosh. It's not completely pure. Now, with this breakdown, these three levels, holiness, completely unholiness, and in the middle, we're going to call it neutral. There's a mixture of good and bad in this middle ground. So now we can appreciate all physical things that we're going to eat, that we ever eat or drink. All of that is either going to be rooted spiritually in this middle realm, which is neutral, which is essentially a combination of good and bad. This is a result of the first sin of man, so good and bad is mixed. But it's neutral. It's not all bad in that it's too dangerous or too harmful to involve ourselves with. That's the second level of bad. That's completely evil, and any involvement is just going to destroy the sanctity and purity of the soul. So now with this in mind, we can totally appreciate the kosher laws, for example. Pig. Pig is an animal that is rooted in the three unclean klipot. It's completely negative as far as we're concerned. And if we would interact and eat this pig and it would become part of us, part of our physical flesh and part of our neshama, so that would be too much negativity for our holy neshama, and it would damage it, it would pollute it, it would contaminate our neshama, which would then result in our thought process becoming contaminated. And of course, physically, we will be affected. It's not because it's physically unhealthy, but as a result of the spiritual ailments that come about through eating unkosher, it has an effect on our ability to physically behave and perform God's commands. So that's why pig. And in addition to pig, all of the shellfish, also an animal that's not shechted properly, if it's shechted wrong, if you cut the neck wrong and it becomes considered to be unkosher, so then it also becomes in that secondary part of evil. What is kosher is really, the term kosher doesn't mean holy or anything like that. It just means prepared or ready to be consumed by us. That's all neutral. That means any vegetation that grows that's not the first 3 years of Orla, that's not forbidden in Israel because of the 7th year of produce. All that would be kosher to eat. All cow meat and all other kosher animal meat that is slaughtered and we take out the blood, which is forbidden, and then of course there's the forbidden fats, so what's left is the kosher meat. That meat is prepared for our consumption. Now, it's not holy. We clearly explain it's actually considered outside of holiness. But what it is it's ready to become holy. It's ready to be elevated. When we eat the physical kosher foods, it is prepared to become internalized without damaging our neshama. Instead, we're able to harness the potential good in the food and use it for divine service and elevate it to the realm of kedusha, to the realm of holiness. Okay, so with this, we completely have understand from a spiritual sense why certain foods we can eat and why certain foods we cannot eat. So Baruch Hashem, with the help of the insights from the Kabbalah, we have added, sensible rules and criteria for why there are kosher and unkosher laws. This cheeseburger that we mentioned that everybody asks about, so the truth is in this cheeseburger there's still an element of something that really transcends logic, because the cheese is kosher and the meat is kosher, and when you put them together you can't eat it. So there's still a level that we can't fully understand in the cheeseburger, which makes it more of a statute in this regard. But again, the mystics do shed some light on this mitzvah as well. They explain that milk corresponds to chesed, kindness, and meat corresponds to gvura, severity and judgment. And mixing the two is not good. Mixing right and left, in this context, right and left is not what we mentioned before, holiness and unholiness, but also kindness and severity. Mixing kindness and severity increases harsh judgment, and we want to avoid this as much as possible. So they explain, eating milk and meat together can increase din, and that's negative. According to their explanation, according to Kabbalah, we can also appreciate why even this mitzvah seems to be unfair. It's not balanced. If you eat milk first, you can eat meat right after it. If you eat meat first, you have to wait to eat milk. So it should be even both ways. But according to this, we can appreciate there's another rule that whatever comes in first, it's like considered on the bottom. Tata gavar. The bottom element that you have there controls what will be absorbed into it. Meaning that if I have milk first and I put meat into the milk, so then we say that ultimately that meat becomes part of the milk, and the milk is increased, which is an increase of kindness. It doesn't represent an increase of negativity, of harsh judgment. But if I have the meat first and then I add the milk, so that milk becomes absorbed into the meat, and that means that the din is overpowering and increasing, and that's negative. So according to Kabbalah, we can understand a little bit about why we can't mix milk and meat, and further why we can't eat the milk after the meat, but rather before is fine. So with this food for thought, let's enjoy our dinner, I guess. At this point, dinner is what's coming up. And hopefully, we'll be able to eat it kosher and it'll be holy, and we'll also be able to enjoy it. And that will help us be, healthy, as we said, to serve Hashem.